A while ago, I made a video explaining the lore of the Aishi family. Since then, a lot of new lore regarding the Aishi family has been made public. In today's video, we'll be explaining the Aishi family lore again. So, let's get into it. The story of the Aishi family dates back to 1780, which marks the year that the first Aishi was born. Something to note is that this individual was not born with any conditions. This meant that the first Aishi was a completely normal person. Anyway, the first Aishi was born in 1780 in a country that is not Japan. They also weren't born with the last name Aishi either. It is said that the first Aishi physically resembled Ayano. Pretty goofy, one could say, but it works. Some other things that are known about the first Aishi are that their parents were in their 20s when she was born and had a hero dare type of personality, which is likely similar to the heroic persona seen in Yandere Simulator. The first Aishi met their senpai when they were around 16 years old in 1796 and fell in love with them. Some unknown person told the senpai that the first Aishi loved him and he returned her feelings. The two formed a relationship the following year in 1797. It was also in this year that both the first Aishi and her senpai immigrated to Japan. They ran into some problems, however, as they did not speak a word of Japanese and had names that the locals could not pronounce at all. To solve this, the two of them adopted Japanified versions of their names. Once they had learned enough Japanese to be able to speak to others, the first Aishi and her senpai decided to be known as husband and wife, as it would be the least complicated way to introduce themselves. This led to them both adopting the last name Aishi, which is why the first Aishi is called that. At around 21 years old, the first Aishi had her first child, who was a girl. This individual was the first person born under the Aishi name. Some other facts about the first Aishi are that they were not named after a blade, they probably killed someone in self-defense at some point in their life, and they ended up meeting an Info-chan-like person. Believe it or not, there are branches of the Aishi family. What do we mean by this? There are different generations of the Aishi family that have unique traits and backstories. Here's a list of all of them. As can be seen, there are a lot of branches of the Aishi family. Notably, there are two different branches that involved in Aishi not finding someone who triggered the senpai effect. However, they both dealt with this issue differently. One died alone while the other had a family out of convenience. Another notable branch of the Aishi family involved an Aishi who became a ninja. Specifically, the Aishi realized that the skills used to get with their senpai were useful in becoming a spy or assassin. They had children who also became ninjas. Due to their success in being ninjas, they were never recorded in history. It makes you wonder why we notice if they were never recorded. Something else that needs to be noted is that not every Aishi succeeded in getting their senpai. Some branches of the Aishi family ended due to a member dying or getting caught trying to eliminate their rivals. If a percentage had to be estimated, around 50% of all Aishis failed in getting their senpai. Here's some extra information about the Aishi family and its various branches. What about the Aishi family being in Baraza Town? The first members of the Aishi family to move to Baraza Town were Kataba Aishi and her husband, Torahiko Aishi. Sometime after this, their daughter, Dozuki Aishi, requested for them to add a basement to the house. Believe it or not, they agreed, and a basement was soon added to the Aishi household. The Aishi basement was built with the help of non-Japanese workers, who were paid to shut the fuck up about the project. Even though there were problems along the way, construction was completed within a year. It was in this basement that Dozuki kidnapped and broke her senpai. In the present day, the Aishi household is owned by Ryoba Aishi and Jokichi Yudasai. Following their marriage, Ayano's grandparents and great-grandparents moved out of the house. Something to note is that not every member of the Aishi family lives in Baraza Town, or even Japan. Some members moved to other countries while others remained in Japan for different reasons. Now let's talk about the Aishi condition. The Aishi condition, also known as the senpai effect, makes it so that an Aishi is attracted to a single person. It can only be triggered once, and when an Aishi has reached a certain age, which is normally around 18 to 20 years old. Once an Aishi has found someone who triggers the senpai effect, they can only love that specific person. However, they won't be able to confess to their senpai until 10 weeks have passed. That also explains why Yandere Simulator takes place over the course of 10 weeks. Regarding the origins of the Aishi condition, it's known that it is not supernatural. The story of its origin was passed down from generation to generation, but as of the present day, it's seen as a fucking joke. Yes, I really said that. Anyway, members of the Aishi family view their senpais in one of two ways. Some see them as true soulmates, while other Aishis view them as coping mechanisms. If an Aishi never meets their senpai, they suffer emotionally for life. However, they are not shamed by other members of the Aishi family, but rather pitied. One thing I forgot to mention earlier is regarding the age difference. In order for someone to trigger the senpai effect, they have to be older than an Aishi, no matter how small or large the age difference is. There have been age gaps as small as a few days and as large as 20 years within the Aishi family. What about when a senpai dies? If this happens, there are 3 things that can happen. If the senpai dies before 21 years of marriage or while the condition is over 66% active, the Aishi will end their own life. Why? At that point, they see no reason to keep living. After 21 to 55 years of marriage, or the condition is 33 to 66% active, an Aishi is not guaranteed to end their own life. However, it is still a possibility. Once an Aishi thinks their senpai is gone forever, they'll snap, meaning they'll enter a phase that makes them emotionless and violent. While in the snap phase, an Aishi's only goal is to kill their senpai and eventually themselves. How would one stop this? It comes down to ending the life of the snapping Aishi. In essence, the impact of the Aishi condition on an Aishi depends on the individual in question. Some Aishis mind broke their husbands while others avoided doing so. In addition, some Aishis managed to avoid using bloodshed to get with their senpai. There are even members who used non-violent methods for eliminating their rivals. Now let's talk about some Aishi family traditions. One of them has to do with their names. Every member of the Aishi family, except the first Aishi, Ayano and Ayato, are named after blades. This is done to make every Aishi have a name that sounds pretty, but has a double meaning. Ayano's name is notable for a couple of reasons. Like we said earlier, Ayano is not named after a blade. Why is this the case? Her father, Jokichi Yudasai, added the Japanese word for color in her name. This was done on the off chance that Ayano did not turn out like the other members of the Aishi family. Something notable is that if the family somehow runs out of names, they'll likely reuse the name of a previous member of the Aishi family. Does that make sense? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Another tradition involves their senpai. After an Aishi and their senpai marry, their senpai changes their last name to Aishi. This is somewhat grounded in reality, as in Japan, there is a practice called mukoyoshi. This is where a man marries a woman and is adopted by the woman's family, choosing to take her family's last name. This could likely be the case with the Aishi family, but don't quote me on that. Now let's talk about the Aishi family's relationship with each other. The Aishis tend to not be that close with other family members. After finding a senpai, they usually don't interact with other Aishis. Some individuals in the family are seen as the black sheep of the family, such as Dozuki, Ayano's cousin, and Ayano herself. Dozuki is seen as an asshole, Ayano's cousin is described as being too full of herself, and Ayano is seen as being weird because of her numbness. A shared belief among the family is that if one of them is accused of murder, it's likely true, because they either are skilled at serial killing or know that their bloodline has that tendency. Whether or not this is always the case is unknown. When members of the Aishi family do meet, they will most likely share advice on getting away with murder. One example of this would be Ayano's cousin teaching Ayano extra stuff in a parking lot, similar to the 2020 X Mode tutorial. What about the Aishi family's relationship with their senpais? Let's just say that their relationship is pretty weird. As mentioned earlier, Aishis don't view their senpai in a romantic way, but more as a cure for their condition. Something interesting is that a senpai can influence how an Aishi behaves and develops emotionally. A senpai who is assertive may help an Aishi not commit murder, while a submissive senpai would not influence an Aishi's development. Funnily enough, senpais don't know that they can do this. They only become aware if an Aishi tells them about it. The loss of a senpai before the ability to fully feel emotions has been fully developed can have very dire consequences on an Aishi. They are said to feel like they permanently lost the capacity to hear music, see color, and feel warmth. This, in turn, leads to the Aishi falling into a very deep depression and coma-like state. If the senpai is lost after they fully develop their ability to feel emotions, however, the Aishi would not fall into a coma. They would still feel an extremely deep sense of loss and pain that is far beyond what a normal human would feel at the loss of a loved one. Basically, they'd feel very large levels of emotional pain from their senpai's death. Something that's really interesting is that every senpai in the Aishi family has a support network. They give each other advice on how to cope with being the partners of serial killers. Just like the members of the Aishi family, every senpai has their own unique personalities. This determines how close every senpai becomes with each other. For this section, we'll be sharing random trivia about the Aishi family. None of this information belongs in a specific category, so we'll just lump them together. It's unlikely that an Aisha would believe in any religion, as that'd be out of character for them. Another fun fact is that as of the present day, the Aisha with the highest knowledge, skill, and experience in getting away with murder is Ryoba Aishi. This makes sense, as can be seen in 1980s mode. In addition to this, the Aishi condition is viewed differently by different members of the Aishi family. Some view it as a curse, while other Aishis view it as a medical disorder. Essentially, the Aishi condition has different interpretations. One useless fact about the Aishi family is that there are two members who know how to use a gun. They are Ryoba and Kataba Aishi. It makes sense for Kataba to know how to operate a gun, as she supposedly worked for the CIA. I'm not sure why Ryoba knows how to use a gun, however. One more fun fact about the Aishi family is that Ayano will likely be able to find a solution for the Aishi condition during the first week of Yandere Simulator. That being said, it can only happen during the first week of gameplay. Should I make a video sharing useless information about Yandere Simulator? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And just like that, we have arrived at the end of the video. If you want me to make more videos about Yandere Simulator, then make sure to like and subscribe. On that note, feel free to watch this video next.